I mean, just execution, I think. We're trying to find an answer in here, and, what we're doing is not good enough. We know it. I mean, it's embarrassing, frankly, just the way that, we're letting these games slip away from us, and there's not too many of these left. So we know the position we're in and what it's going to take to climb out of it. So
Geeky isn't wrong. And this is not the first time a player on the Boston Bruins used the word embarrassing to describe their play. As a fan of this hockey club, it's hard to watch, and I'm sure it's getting harder on the players. We keep hearing this team is made for the playoffs, but the dream of making the playoffs is getting further away after each loss. The teams in front of the Bruins are playing better hockey right now, and frankly, are better built for the playoffs than the Boston Bruins. Right now, all I'm seeing is a fan base getting more and more divided and pointing fingers at individual players and coaches. The Boston Bruins are 5-5-2 in their last 10 games. Their winning percentage is .531 and barely ahead of the New York Rangers in the standings. Remember the New York team that was throwing in the towel a couple weeks ago? I think it's time for a retool. But I know there are many that still think they can turn this year around. My question to that section of the fan base is why? What about this Bruins team gives you hope? In this video, I'm going to share my thoughts onto why I think it's time for a retool, because as I broke down in my last video, they can't do a rebuild because they're handcuffed by no move clauses. So buckle up, Bruins fans. I'm here to give you the latest info on your beloved Boston Bruins. If you've been liking my Bruins content, please leave me a like and subscribe. If you've already done so, thank you, and let's get into it. I want to start off by talking about the saying we keep hearing, and that is, this team is built for the playoffs. We have been hearing this from Bruins management all summer, and frankly, I don't believe it anymore. For a team to be built for the playoffs, they must be good enough to win in the regular season. The playoffs are the regular season turned up to 100, with fast pace, lots of hitting, and hard-nosed hockey. If the Bruins make the playoffs, they would have to either play Florida, Toronto, or who is leading in the Eastern Conference right now. If you look at those teams, they have what the Bruins used to have, which is speed, skill, good defense, and play hard-nosed hockey. I hate saying that about the Leafs, but it's the reality this season. I live in the Toronto area and watch a lot of their games, and they're a lot better team than I've seen them in years. The Bruins look slow, disorganized at times, and continue to get outshot game after game, leaving their goaltenders hung out to dry. It's truly not just one player, as each game, it's a different group of guys that look like they weren't ready to play. I have been harder on players like Zadorov, but oddly enough, it's because he plays most of the game right now because of the back end so hurt, so I'm gonna see him a lot more. Sure, you can say they don't have McAvoy or Lindholm in the lineup, but they did at the start of the season, and they still played like this, what we're seeing right now. The Boston Bruins this offseason got bigger, stronger, but considerably slower. They've had a very hard time keeping pace in games, and by the second period, look tired, and they get blown out at times. Last night against New Jersey, there was a sequence when Swayman literally made like 11 huge stops in a row, and then they finally scored. But he was just getting rebound after rebound after rebound pelted on him, and no one did anything. Some are describing this team as a team full of third-line players, and that's no shot at these guys. They signed this offseason, but it's kind of true. You need to be playing sound hockey to win playoffs, and you're not seeing it right now from this Boston Bruins team. The only thing the Bruins are consistent at with this season is defensive breakdowns, and you're not winning hockey games that way. You still need speed and skill in the playoffs as well, and the Bruins don't have much of it. David Pastrnak has been on a tear of late, but it doesn't matter because it's not translating into wins. I know people don't want to hear it, but Jeremy Swayman has played considerably better as of late after stinking out the rink at the start of the season. But again, it doesn't matter anymore. In the past 10 games, they've been outshot 358 to 274, meaning the puck is in their zone a heck of a lot more than the opposite team. That doesn't sound like a playoff team. And some of this fan base are blaming goaltending for the issue. You can 100% say at the start of the season, their goaltending cost them some games. But it's their defensive play that is killing them now. And kind of at the beginning of the season, but their goaltending wasn't there for them, so it even looked worse. The playoffs are all about defensive play, and the Bruins lack it. They have one of the worst goal differentials in the league, and some of the worst special teams in the league. Yes, they won in 2011 with a terrible power play, but they also had an amazing roster of players, and they don't have that anymore. They also had a great penalty kill that year. The teams that are worse than the Bruins right now for goal differential are Pittsburgh, Anaheim, San Jose, and Chicago. I seriously doubt anyone watching this thinks they're cup contenders. According to Ty Anderson, the Bruins have allowed 3 power play goals against 7 times this season. They allowed 3 power play goals against in a single game just 7 times in 769 games before this season. The Bruins would be going into the playoffs with a dreadful PK and power play. I want to hear from you, though. If you think this Bruins team is made for the playoffs, like the Bruins management continues to say. I know I've spoken about what a retool would look like, but I never shared what I think should they do and why. In 22-23, the Pittsburgh Penguins did not make the playoffs and finished 9th in the East. That year, leading up to the deadline, them and Washington were at a crossroads, a lot like the Boston Bruins are right now. At the time, though, it was Washington that decided to start the retool, and the Pittsburgh Penguins decided they had to court a win and did not. Washington started to trade expiring contracts, getting back some serviceable players and acquiring picks. They traded Orlov, Gustafsson, Eller, Hathaway, and got back 2 first-round picks and some second-round picks and some players and some third-round picks. They decided that regardless of if they make the playoffs or not, they needed to get assets back for their players. The Penguins, they didn't do that. They actually acquired players and moved out picks to surround Crosby and Malkin. Even last year, when they finally decided to move on from players and trade those UFAs, they traded Jake Gensel, not for picks and prospects, but for Michael Bunting, who ended up being the center of the deal coming back to Pittsburgh. Oh, they got some picks and prospects, but nothing huge because they wanted Michael Bunting. No first-round pick in that deal, and it's still a head-scratcher, and it makes 0 sense right now. I wouldn't even call that a retool trade because they tried to get players that can play now and help the team now and still push for the playoffs. If you're doing a retool, you're getting picks and prospects, and you're filling the gaps as you can, but you're trying to build a roster for the future. If you're doing a rebuild, you're doing a total teardown. But acquiring a guy like Michael Bunting, that's still saying, hey, we can't afford to sign Jake Gensel again, but we want someone to fill in and give us at least a little bit of the production we got from him. Washington, for 2 years now, has been moving out expiring deals and acquiring picks and prospects. In the offseason, they sign players to short-term deals and acquire players that have been upside that weren't exactly fitting in on their other team. And those players would be someone like Pierre-Luc Dubois, who's kind of worked out for them. And a lot of Bruins fans at the time, they really didn't want the Bruins to do it, and that's rumored to be the deal that they almost had with LA that Allmark said no to. They spent 2 years getting cap space and picks, but still making the team competitive instead of holding on to the hope like the Penguins did. Washington was able to make the deal with Ottawa that Boston should have made for Jacob Chychrun and solidify their back end. Washington still has 5 picks in the first 3 rounds in 2025, which still allows them to stock up in that cupboard. In a 2-year span, they were able to refill the cupboard and make the team competitive again. They even made the playoffs last year, but got bounced out in the first round rather fast, but did it after making all those trades. The Boston Bruins are at the crossroad, and I kind of thought they were after Bergeron retired, but I feel they overachieved last season, which made management double down this offseason and add players like Elias Lindholm and Nikita Zadorov. I think the time is now for the Boston Bruins to move on from expiring contracts and acquire picks and prospects or players that need a change of scenery. It's not the time to try and get JT Miller and make a push for the playoffs because nothing about how they played should tell you it's a good idea. I would trade Justin Brazeau, Cole Koepke, Jonas Korpisalo, and Trent Frederick. I would look to move players like Brandon Carlo and Morgan Geekie to see what the market is for them. You would be forced to play the likes of Fabian Lysell, Georgi Merkulov, and John Farinacci in your lineup, but I don't see that as a bad thing. I would not move on from Brad Marchand unless he asks the Bruins organization because the Bruins organization is known as one of the most respectful around the leagues, and I don't want to change that. When you're trying to acquire players in the offseason and have players come here, the word from other players about how the organization works goes a long way for players to actually sign with that team. I've said this before. The rumors are the Bruins and Marchand already have an agreement to get a new deal done, so don't change that. You go to him and tell him the next 2 years will be a retool, and you see what he says. If he wants to go, he can go, but don't force him out. The other players I didn't mention is because this isn't a rebuild, and frankly, the majority of them can't be traded, which I detailed in my last video. The Bruins have David Pastrnak, Charlie McAvoy, Jeremy Swayman, Pavel Zacha, Hampus Lindholm, Mason Lohrei, just to name a few that can help to keep the team competitive. The likes of Elias Lindholm and Nikita Zadorov aren't going to be traded because of no move clause, so I'm not beating a dead horse here. Cam Neely mentioned that the Bruins are at a crossroads, but I think the path to take is obvious, but also going to be hard for a lot of people to swallow. I say, you make the decision now and you move on from guys. And if you still make the playoffs, oh well, you made the playoffs. Reassess the coaching in the offseason and go from there. They already fired a coach this season and nothing has really changed. And they've reverted to the same team we saw night in and night out under Montgomery. In fact, I've already seen the same comments from people on social media of saying he keeps messing with the lineups. It's like literal deja vu of what they said about Montgomery before they fired him. I also believe the front office needs a change, and if they do go in a new direction, it shouldn't stop them from retooling now. you can still get approval from ownership if you're going to make any deals. I want to hear from you though. If you think I'm way off on wanting a retool right now, let me know in the comments. That's a wrap on today's video. To stay up to date on all the news surrounding the Boston Bruins, please subscribe and drop me a like. If news breaks surrounding the Boston Bruins, be sure to check out the channel. If you've already subscribed to the channel, thank you. I'll see you next time.